Hi, and welcome to Trust Birth, Trust Life. I'm Paul Golden, the traveling midwife and mediator and various other things. Here we have Katie, who will introduce herself a little. I know Katie through hypnobirthing, the Catherine Graves hypnobirthing. We've attended some conferences, done some work together. And Katie is a poet. So that's something you could kick off with. How are you, Katie? What would you like to contribute? A poem or something else?
Oh, well, thank you very much for that introduction. I do have some poems that are all about birth. It's a way that I can express myself, I think, and all my frustration, and around birth, but also looking at the miraculous nature of
Yeah.
the birth process. So,
So
and I put all of that into my poetry, and it's been really cool because I've got to speak at loads of conferences and perform my poems. And quite often, student midwives contact me and say, "Hey, I want to put it in my dissertation, one of your poems," which is really nice.
don't you find the arts and the drama are another side? We've got all the science and the research and the statistics, but birth is a very passionate event. And you mentioned the word frustration. The opposite is satisfaction. So you're also suggesting with your poetry and the miracle of birth, you're enjoying some satisfaction because I think you're attending, is it more births now since COVID? I don't know. How is it for you?
Yeah, well, personally, because I've had my children at home, so it has actually been quite difficult to be on call. So I've been mostly concentrating on birth education from afar, and then if people need doulas, I've had 3 births since COVID,
Right.
um, but mostly I've been passing my clients on to other doulas who are able to get out more. With my kids being at home, it's just been
Great.
really, really hard.
So I
The
think
kids have gone
today
back to school now.
you can tell us about one of your home births that was filmed, but do what you would like. If you want to tell us a poem, this will show people some of your
Yeah,
poetry.
okay. So I'll do a really quick poem. This one's
Okay.
only 1 minute long and it's called Birthplace Matters. And I wrote this for the Birthplace Matters campaign, which was a few years ago. It was set up by doula Paula Cleary. And in her area, Kings Lynn, in the UK, they closed the home birth service, so women in that area could not access home birth midwives, and they either had to birth unassisted or they had to go into hospital. Or at the time or could pay for an independent midwife, but they couldn't access NHS midwives. So she set up this campaign, and I wrote this poem called Birthplace Matters to help with the promotion of this campaign. And it goes like this: Birthplace matters. The system's in tatters. Surely the state cannot dictate where I give birth. How on earth can the NHS not provide for me to have a midwife at my side? I want to give birth at my own pace, in a space I have created, on my own terms. This is my body and my baby. I'd like my own germs. I've researched the evidence. I've looked at the odds. I've considered the stats. And I've questioned the gods. But before you think that birthing at home is dangerous or crazy, my thought process hazy, consider the evidence. When the birthplace study tells me that birthing at home is just as safe for my baby as birthing in hospital, and it's much safer for me. When some trusts are working hard to educate, and in doing so will increase the home birth rate, how is it fair that I need to fight to give birth to my child where it feels right?
Thank you for that. It's wonderful.
You're
And
welcome.
I hear that that part of England is kind of on the east. I don't know if you call it mid east. And it's a bit of a lottery in England whether you have home birth or not. So some areas will
Yeah,
have
but
a team. Yeah. Go on.
at least we get the opportunity. At least we're able, at least it's
Yeah. Yeah.
legal, as
Yeah.
it is not legal in so many places. And I have had both of my children at home, even my first one. And I couldn't imagine if being told I need to go into hospital, because
Yeah.
I just know the benefits. Like, why would you make that journey? If, well, for me anyway,
Yeah.
Like, I feel more comfortable at home. I never feel particularly comfortable in a hospital environment. Sometimes it's nice to have a
Yeah.
little break, but most of the time when I've been in hospital, I just think, oh, I just want to get out of here. And
Hmm.
part of giving birth is feeling safe in your environment and
Yeah.
not being disturbed, which is absolutely not what hospital looks is like.
Uh, And you've been at some births since COVID's happened. Have you in hospital or at home?
Yeah, so I out of the 3 births that I have been at since COVID, 2 of them were at home and one of them was in a attached midwifery unit,
Great.
birth centre, but
Great.
like right next to the
Yeah.
hospital ward. And they were all planned. So um the two people who gave birth at home, they both got their home births. Oh, do you know what? I tell a lie, actually. One of them was a freestanding midwifery unit, and she had her baby there. And one of them was a home birth, and she had her baby at home. And the other one was a planned hospital birth, and she had a cesarean. But she felt comfortable with all the
Yeah.
decisions that she made.
So
So
to be clear, both of us know that there's great things in hospitals, especially cesarean, when it's required, and it can be done with so much
absolutely.
love and kindness and consideration and respect for the woman's choices and the baby's needs, like keeping the cord connected, not separating the mother and baby, and not processing, but keeping the whole family unit. So some hospitals manage that really well, and other hospitals are lagging behind, and hopefully they will catch up. So we're not condemning and criticizing or judging anything, we're just contrasting experiencing. Um,
Yeah, definitely. And interestingly, and this is what I like about being a doula, it's about supporting the person who's giving birth. So
yeah,
the fact that I had 3 clients all giving birth in different places, I
yeah,
give the information and then I support my clients in that choice. And I think
yeah,
that's what being a doula is about.
yeah. So I'm witnessing birth in different countries like Hungary or Bosnia or wherever, and I see the physiology as being the same. But the culture can be, oh, we're traditional in this country, we follow the rules. The rules are you go to the hospital. And then if the woman has an experience she regrets or didn't want to have, maybe the baby's separated in some cases for many days for observation of, say, blood sugars or feeding or something. It does seem to be power and control that some hospitals seem to want to exert that. I would say more in European countries where they tend not to look at research. They tend to favour their traditions. Whereas
Mm.
Commonwealth countries, I've worked in Australia, New Zealand, the UK, are more inclined towards research. So whatever we think isn't working so well there, when you come to Europe, they're really not following the research. And then when you go outside of Europe, Croatia, Balkans, Turkey, perhaps certain areas will be great, excellent practices, but in general, the countries may not be following the research. So
Mm.
I had a thought and it's gone, but I was going to, oh yeah, you've got the pelvis behind you. So saying physiologically, birth is the same. What is it that you like to show with the pelvis that's helpful to parents?
Mm.
Something about the symmetry or
Yeah.
asymmetry?
So I think a lot of women and people giving birth don't know that the pelvis, the bones move, they're flexible. So if we can move with them, we might just give the baby just a little bit more space to get down. So I trained in dancing for birth in 2020, and that's just about, playing music, dancing to whatever it is that you like to do. You can move your pelvis, move your body, and just help your baby descend that little bit easier. So dancing's a nice thing to do, and also asymmetry of the pelvis. So if your pelvis is not symmetrical, as in the way that you carry it, yeah, the way that you're positioning, if you move like one hip down or the
Ah,
other hip down, it makes the space inside your pelvis asymmetric. So your baby's just got that little bit more space to move around and hopefully be able to descend and be born more easily.
I mean, a simple thing is if the mother moves, the baby moves. And we in hospital quite often are finding a labour slowed down, the baby's got stuck, and the woman unfortunately is on her back. It's expected of her, or she's got an epidural, so she can't get off her back. But when
Yeah.
you mention freestanding unit, I feel the image of a freestanding woman, upright birth, physiological birth. Uh, the pelvis is much more dynamic and moving. The baby is moving. It's able to almost slalom between the ischial spines, the bones that we sit on. If they're completely facing each other, it's a narrow outlet. As soon as a woman lifts one leg up, then they change like this, and the baby can kind of slalom through if he's a good skier.
Mm. Yeah, and it's like upright forward leaning positions
Yeah,
can be really super helpful and can give you 30% extra space in your pelvis.
exactly.
I,
As
I
does
really
squatting. Squatting gives the pelvis a great outlet of 30%. So even there's a surgical thing called symphotomy to cut between the symphysis pubis in an emergency to help a baby out. That only increases the pelvis by 30%. Well, if the woman is not on her back but squatting, we achieve the same thing.
yes. Yeah, so it just makes sense, isn't it? If when a woman has freedom of movement, when she
Yeah,
can feel the sensations, when she
yeah.
can rely on her own instincts, she knows which way to move to allow her baby to descend most easily.
And I'm sure you've seen different places as I've worked in Manchester and London and Oxford, and each place has its own leadership, its own culture. And the NHS is very under resourced, very stressed environment. So if the staff are stressed, that comes across to the women. But how is it with COVID? I think you might like to say something. What's the impact perhaps on the human rights? For example, are babies separated from mothers? Are they at risk of infections or? Um,
Yeah, I don't know so much about that, but I do know that interventions are going up, are massively on the rise. I heard a statistic the other day that one hospital, it was 44% cesarean rate,
right.
which is outrageous, really. If you're thinking, really, 44% of people giving birth were not able to have a physiological birth. So there's more forceps, more ventouse. This is what I'm hearing on the grapevine. It's
And
like,
yet, conversely, like from Ina May Gaskin having more than 95% normal
yeah,
births, I think it was about 3% transfer rate they had. Many other good midwifery practices, often groups of midwives working together, are achieving the same thing today as Ina May Gaskin was working with 30 or 40 years ago. And that is that 95 plus percent are having wonderful births, not needing to transfer. But if somebody
mm,
goes to a hospital and they're healthy and normal, we seem to get them on the production line and starts interfering, and there's a cost to that interference often. So some people need it, but most people are told a story that they needed it, and they might want to believe that and keep that story going.
yeah. Well, they have to believe it, really.
Yeah,
Yeah,
otherwise
a
it's
lot.
trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. They have to believe that they were doing the right thing for themselves and their baby, and that.
Have you got some tips on what people don't know, because we don't know what we don't know?
Mm, gosh, there is so much we don't know about birth, isn't there? I remember being um, first pregnant, and I'd never even considered that women don't give birth on their backs if they chose to. I never really reconsidered that impression of a woman, like the image that I had in my head of a woman lying on her back and being scared, something that I'd seen many times on One Born Every Minute, or films and TV. I just never even questioned that. So when I was really super fortunate, because when I was pregnant, I had a friend who just qualified as a midwife, but she was like a radical midwife, student midwife, and then I was at a festival about 5 months pregnant, and I encountered the yurt of the Association of Radical Midwives. And being at a festival, I was having a rather different kind of festival to normal, being 5 months pregnant, and I spent quite a lot of time in this yurt chatting to the midwives, and there was a doula there as well. And I kind of said, oh, thinking about having a home birth, because I'd just been reading about it, and they said, oh yeah, great, and they were really positive about it. And then that was where I read Ina May Gaskin's Spiritual Midwifery. They had a little library in this yurt, and I just spent loads of time there. Like, they did a visualization with me. They chatted about birth, and it just really helped to solidify my ideas around birth.
So your ideas became a reality with you birthing at home, and you had it filmed.
I
For
did have it filmed, yeah. So when I was first pregnant, with baby number one, and
is that what you still call her today, baby number one?
baby number one. I call her Matilda. So with Matilda, let me think. Sorry, you're gonna have to stop it.
No, it's okay. I was just saying that you had it filmed, and you could tell us the reason you had it filmed, or the link if you like.
Okay, so I did half a natal hypnotherapy course. When I did half, because at the time I was moving house, and we were about to buy our first house.
But did it make a
saving up.
difference?
Yeah, it did, definitely. So, but the course that I did was split into two halves. It was split into the part that was can't do it.
Don't worry if your brain's going. But maybe linked to the Catherine Graves hypnobirthing, think about what your natal hypnobirthing was, and how is that different from what you're teaching now, or how good is KGH? I don't know. Anything you'd like to share on that?
When I was first pregnant, I did a half a natal hypnotherapy course, and the reason I did half was because I didn't have enough money to do the full thing. And the teacher said, "Do you want to?" I don't know why I can't do it.
That's all right, Katie.
Let me just eat something.
Yeah.
And then we just
Yeah.
stop it a minute.
Yeah.
And then we'll just start again.
Yeah.
I just get really nervous.
It's all right.
Which is ridiculous.
But it's good that you're talking to me, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where's the record button? I can't actually see the record button now. Oh yeah, pause recording. It's recording now. Let's talk about birth.
Have we not been recording before this?
Yeah, I just paused it for the last few minutes.
I thought that was really good content.
Ah. So we met at a KGH, Catherine Graves Hypnobirthing Conference in Manchester, where you read a poem. And what was I doing again?
You were talking about human rights and women's rights in childbirth, like you always do, Paul.
Ah.
That's what I remember anyway. I'm probably just guessing, but you do talk about that a lot, and you're excellent at talking about that, if I may say.
That's where I got my car windows smashed and my wallet stolen from the car, and got to know the other side of Manchester. I
feel bad because Manchester is my hometown. It's like my hood, and you came to Manchester, and I felt bad for you, Paul. I did.
Fine.
Yeah.
I
actually not always like that in Manchester, I promise.
Because the policeman told me that 2 windows were smashed and only one was, I felt quite lucky, and life moves on, everything's fine. And here we are some years later. That was about 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah,
I'd say so. Maybe 5 even.
Yeah. I was in New Zealand 5 years ago, so I know it could only be 4 years. So
okay, 2017 it was.
Yeah. Okie doke. So let's talk about birth. What happened for you?
I think for me, it was about coming on a journey, really, because I had always grown up with the idea that birth was a really scary thing. In fact, it was my mum says that giving birth to me was the worst thing ever.
So birth stories matter, don't they? What we're told our whole life.
And they really matter. And I grew up without siblings for 12 years because my mum couldn't imagine having another baby because she said it was so awful. And she had gone to the the local gynecologist, she'd gone to the best person in the area. Apparently she paid, it was a private gynecologist. He has an excellent reputation, and he was very charismatic apparently. And he said to my mum said, I don't want to feel anything, and he said, don't worry, you just leave it to us, we will deal with everything. And she went into hospital, and she hadn't got any techniques to deal with the sensations that she was going to feel. She hadn't expected to feel anything. She just expected that they were going to take the baby out of her, which is, the impression that they gave her. Don't worry about anything. We will do it all. And then when she did feel the sensations, because she was actually in labor for some of it before she had the epidural that she wanted, she had no ways to deal with the sensations, and she was really scared. And then they gave her an epidural, and she remembers waking up and not she doesn't remember birthing me, but she does remember waking up and thinking that her legs were paralyzed because she couldn't move them, and being really scared about that. And then she got a hospital acquired infection and stayed in hospital for 10 days, um, and of course blames it all on childbirth. Childbirth gets a bad rap, rather than how the birth was dealt with, and the fact that she wasn't really informed about it. It was a very
You got to wonder
paternalistic.
what story she was told by her mother and her mother's mother, because this affects us all. I grew up with the story that I'm a twin born at home, and so I thought having twins at home is quite normal, and then in the hospital we turn it into a carnival. So it really impacts on all of us, and also the obstetrician and the midwives. How were they born? Were they rescued at a birth, and are they wanting to rescue other people? Or do they have confidence in the physiology of birth because they've witnessed good birth? So most doctors, I say most, many doctors are not generally fortunate enough to observe upright birth or physiological birth. They're coming in to rescue and help a situation. If they're fortunate to spend time with a woman, they see her birthing naturally, they're realizing, of course, there's power in gravity and being upright, in the pelvis being dynamic and moving. But when they've never experienced that. So recently at a home birth, doula was herself a doctor in obstetrics, a very junior doctor, in a country where they do a lot of coercion and never see physiological birth. But her eyes are open because her friends are giving birth at home. So she's learning a lot of doing nothing. That's the main thing she's learning, because even when she touches, her training is to delve in deep, to really feel things, instead of put the hands very lightly and let the hands pick up the information that you're listening to the body, listening to the baby, and gently feel how is something, rather than I think it's their training that's on dead bodies is very physiological, as in pathological. They're used to figuring out why is something gone wrong with this mechanical machine, the body, instead of let's witness its capacity, which can
Yeah,
change. Yeah.
it's just such a um, medical approach, isn't it? Just to think of the woman's body as a defective machine.
And yet an obstetrician I know had her second set of twins at home in water. She didn't birth in the hospital where she worked because she wanted the freedom of being at home and everything. She trusted birth. I think this word trust is very powerful. If we are trusting ourselves, trusting life, instead of just trusting somebody else to take responsibility for us, which sounds like the
Yeah,
story of your mother. She trusted the doctor. Don't worry, we'll take care of you. We'll deliver your baby. Okay, I won't
yeah,
do the inner work. Whereas a woman does have to prepare. She needs to go on a journey in herself, probably, whether it's walk and talk or yoga or reading Ina May Gaskin type things. Yeah.
yeah. I feel so fortunate. Like with my second baby, for example, the midwife, she was a one-to-one midwife, which is a company that's closed down now.
That was case loading. I did some work with them. Yes. I'll
Yeah, they
plug in.
absolutely. It was an incredible. Um, it was an incredible company, really, and the midwife that I had was just wonderful, and she didn't question me once ever. She fully trusted me to birth my baby. And that was a really powerful thing, really, really powerful, rather than saying, you know, well, these are the risks and coming from that approach. She
I think
just
women
trusted
need to
me.
know they do not have to have the conversation about risk. It's their choice. Everything's their choice. So when somebody says, oh, you must talk to that woman about the risks of home birth, only if the woman allows. So that's a good expression to have, as far as the woman allows. Another
Yeah.
expression is to look at what the law requires, because it is all woman's choice. So if somebody's going to come and talk to you about risks that you don't want that conversation, no thanks. And you don't need words. You can use your body just to move away, walk away.
I always think that, like with choice, if women and birthing people, they don't know what their choices are. They
Yeah.
don't know that it is a legitimate choice to decline a vaginal examination, for example. That's one of the things that I didn't know. I just thought it, when, you know, when I gave birth, I thought that it was compulsory to have a vaginal examination with my first baby. And it wasn't actually until I was in labor the second time and my midwife turned up and I said, oh, are you going to check me? This was at home. Are you going to check me? And she said, oh, she said, I don't need to. She said, I can if you want. Um, and she said, it doesn't mean anything anyway. You said
Yeah.
you can go from 4 centimeters to 10 centimeters in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It really doesn't mean anything. And I was like, oh, right. Okay. She said, it's not standard practice where I work.
And we can see externally signs of progress. If a woman looks like she's progressing or the baby's dropping and engaging into the pelvis, you see the woman's body moving in different ways, and even the noises, sounds that a woman makes.
Yeah.
She needs to be in her own space. And as soon as we start getting her on her back to examine her, we stop the process. Sometimes we stop the labor for days by interfering like this. So it's, again, a question of learning how to do nothing but be present and to be the space,
Mm.
to hold the space, but also to be the space.
Yeah, I really feel like student midwives, that's where they should be starting off, learning about this kind of birth. Like I have spoken to many groups of midwives, third year students, and they might never have seen a physiological birth, third
Yeah,
stage, or they
yeah,
might never
yeah,
have seen a baby born at home. You know, and the difference between that undisturbed birth compared to a hospital birth. And so
yeah.
what you see is normal. Can I just tell you a story, Paul?
Go on.
Okay, so I told this story when I talked at the 14th Normal Labour and Birth Conference. And I was keynote speaker. It was the biggest conference I've ever spoken at. And the story goes like this. So a friend of mine, his best friend's parents were having a big anniversary. It was like their 50th anniversary or something. And they decided they wanted to go on an adventure. And they decided to go to China. And they went traveling in China and they took a couple of friends with them. It was a really special thing. And while they were traveling in China, they went to a restaurant in rural China. And they sat down and it was their anniversary and they ordered a bottle of champagne. And the waiter said, oh, are you sure you want champagne? And they were like, yes, it's our anniversary. And he was like, oh, right, okay, are you sure? And they were like, yes. They thought that's a weird question. We just ordered some champagne. And then next thing, the maitre d' comes over of the restaurant and he says, hey, like I heard you order champagne. Is this true? And they were like, yes, it's our anniversary. We ordered champagne. And next thing, all of the waiters from the restaurant and all the kitchen staff, they all come out and they stand around this person's table. And they were kind of thinking, what? This is a bit weird. And then the owner of the restaurant comes out carrying this bottle of champagne. And then everyone starts to cheer, all the waiters and the kitchen staff, they start to cheer, yay! And the couple and their friends are just sat there like, what is going on? And next thing, the manager takes this champagne and he shakes it up and he undoes the cork and he shakes it up and he pops the cork and he sprays it all over them, over their face, and they're dripping wet with champagne. And just like, oh, and everyone's cheering, woo! And they're like, what? Like, we were not expecting that. What is going on? And it was because in that restaurant, nobody had ever ordered a bottle of champagne before, because they'd only ever seen the champagne opened at the Grand Prix,
Yeah.
at the Formula One racing. And so they thought that is what you do when you open a bottle of champagne. Yeah. And I think that that is a brilliant analogy for
Yeah.
birth,
Yeah.
because if you do not see a birth that is undisturbed,
Yeah.
then you have no idea what
Yeah.
birth can be like and how that woman can manage the sensations herself
Yeah.
and stay with her body and listen to her body. You've got no idea. You just think that it's a different experience
It,
completely.
it's perfect to hear that. A woman recently had 3 hospital births and her 4th one was at home. And she said she felt unobserved and uninterrupted, which is my intention for how birth could be if the woman wants. And for her to say that's how she felt, and actually she had a couple of friends and a doula and her husband and the 3-year-old and a 5-year-old child and me all present, and yet she felt unobserved. So she got the birth that she wanted in that respect. And you're right, if we're used to seeing the machine that goes ping and having masks and gowns and hats and bright lights in theatres on the woman, and that's what we've seen, we expect that. It's a bit like this champagne being done in the Formula One style. That's what you're going to get, if to some extent, if that's what you
Yeah.
expect. But if you've seen an alternative, experienced it, or your program is out on BBC, it was some years ago now, isn't it? How old is Matilda?
Yeah, no, so Serafina, who's my second child,
Oh yeah,
her birth was filmed on a documentary that was on BBC One, and it was called Childbirth All or Nothing. And it followed the pregnancies of 4 women who, 3 were having home births. One of those was birthing unassisted. I was having a home water birth, and there was another lady who was having an elective cesarean for non-medical reasons. And so the program followed the what they were really asking for was women who were giving birth in a way that's different from the norm, different from mainstream, and who could articulate their reasons for doing so. And it was a really good program.
so
Like
how many
people,
years ago was that?
that was 2015.
And do you think birth is changing? I'm wondering if the gap is increasing, more medicalization, but also more hypnobirthing, more home birth, more unassisted births, more doulas.
I
If you
think
went
it
back
really,
10 years, doulas was a word people didn't know.
yeah, I do think, well, definitely doulas, the use of doulas is increasing, which is a great thing. However, I definitely think birth is becoming more medicalized. I think it's becoming more polarized, even more
Yeah.
polarized,
Yeah.
because you've got, a lot of people, they just do what they're told, they follow the system, they're told that, unless they do X, Y, and Z, they're putting their baby at risk. And what they don't realize is there are risks of all the things that can happen to you, and there are benefits of all the things. So it's when, they're often recommended induction, for example. There's so many women. I think I've had one client in the last 3 years, I would say, who hasn't been recommended induction for one reason or another.
So induction's the norm, isn't it? So if there's one thing, is we might finish up on this session, that you think women really appreciate, is it hypnobirthing? Is it the doula? Is it yoga? What is the thing you find listening to the women around you that they really value the most to help their birth?
I think there are many parts of the jigsaw when you're planning to have the best possible birth experience and stack the odds in your favor to have one. And the it's the mental techniques, it's having breathing techniques and being able to rely on those and being able to come back to the breath, because the breath is everything. But
Yes.
it's also about the body stuff. So, being able to move in ways that are going to be helpful, and knowing that you can move. And maybe if you've been in those positions before and you know what positions are most likely to be able to benefit your baby, and you can move around, listen to your instinct, listen to feel the sensations. So I think it's the body stuff, the mind stuff. It's also about knowing about your environment as well. And I think this is the key part that a lot of antenatal education misses when you go to the mainstream NHS, I suppose, that they're not going to tell you that you can decline intervention, for example, or they're not going to tell you all your options. They merely tell you, and just generalizing here, but they tend to tell you what the pathway is. Yeah, what you do next, rather than what your options are and what do you want to do.
Listening to the body. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've heard the expression, if you've never had chocolate cake, you don't know to ask for it.
Yeah. So if you don't know about your choices in childbirth, you don't know to ask for them, like water birth or something. Okay, so we've got some noise with the neighbours at the moment. I'll wrap this up. I'll cut that. I want us to do an introduction, if you like. I was just thinking the BBC had this Carlos and somebody or other. So I could say, hey, I'm Paul Golden. And you say, I'm Katie Edwards. We're going to show you how to trust birth, trust life, or we're going to talk about how to trust birth, trust life. Would that feel comfortable, or something else?
Yeah, that would be fine. I'm sure there were many more parts of the jigsaw that I've not talked about.
Just saying that there's a jigsaw. I asked you what's the one thing, and you said, oh, there's a jigsaw. That is it, that there is a jigsaw. Okay. And it will be breathing, physiology. You already started to mention there's different things. Yeah, we can give the signpost directions. We don't have to give everything. Yeah. Okay, so I just do the welcome to this podcast, Trust Birth, Trust Life. I'm Paul Golden, and this is Katie Edwards. What are we going to talk about today?
Thank you, Paul. Well, we're going to talk about trusting birth, trusting life, all the different aspects of how people can have a positive birth experience.
Brilliant. Okay, so I might put that at the beginning. We'll see. I don't want to do much messing around editing. I'll try to do it right now. I'll look at that so I can get this done in the next day or two. Yeah. And then I'll share with you what I've edited out, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great. Should we do, are you on Instagram? Should we do an Instagram live?
I'm not, but yes, I have one or two accounts. My tricky bit is I want to link. Do you have to do Instagram from the phone?
Yes, it's an app.